everybody. I'm Tracy, and I'm a design anthropologist. Formally, at my job at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I'm known as, or my title is Senior Program Officer in User Experience and Innovation, but that's really a mouthful, right? So informally, in those same halls, I'm really just referred to as the HCD lady. But I guess I'll let you in on a little secret, and that really who I think of myself inside is as a design anthropologist. I want to start today with a story. It's one I've told several times, but I'm looking out into the audience. I'm not seeing a ton of familiar faces, so I hope you will indulge me. But if you look at the image on this screen, if we were in a Hmong village in northern Thailand, this would probably be quite a familiar sight. We might see them adorning the necks of small children, or we might see them adorning the outfits that the Hmong make every year to celebrate the new year. However, you may come across someone, and it may be striking at first, who is wearing perhaps 10 or 20 of these as necklaces draped around their neck. In the particular village where I worked and had the privilege to, or lived and had the privilege to conduct research for really several years, there was one such girl who was always adorned in this way. And I learned that she had cerebral palsy. Now, one of the things that's important to know about what this image is that the promise that it provides can actually be gleaned from its name. And it's a spirit lock. Now, this is important because if one is ill, stressed, even depressed, and certainly when one is suffering from something like cerebral palsy, the belief is that what has happened is their soul has gotten up and wandered away from their body. Now, the beauty of the spirit lock is that it actually works. You don't have to get into the existential question of whether or not a silver amulet worn around your neck can actually lock your spirit into your body or not. The beauty of the spirit lock is that it acts symbolically. It acts as it is meant to provide protection, aid, comfort, care to its wearer. And when it's worn, it acts as a clarion call to that community to ultimately gather around the wearer and provide what is most needed, that aid, protection, comfort, and care. I want to go back to the term design anthropology. For some, this is sort of an uneasy relationship. People may say that these two terms are in fact antithetical to one another. And we know that in common perception, anthropology is something that sort of catalogs the past. And indeed, throughout my entire career, I've been asked, do I dig up bones? For a smaller subset of the population, we may think of it as really documenting the present day. But really, design is something that has its eyes squarely set on the future. So how is it that these two terms come together? The way I think about it is that life is socially constructed. And what I mean by this is that life emerges, the present emerges, out of the stories that we tell ourselves about the past and that set the conditions for our emergent future. What that means for design anthropology is that it helps us to translate human values, and human values are most commonly understood and shared through stories, into tangible experiences that propel us into the future. Now, you may ask where empathy fits into all of this discussion. And I would say that for anthropologists, empathy is an essential component of ethnography, that thing that we do, which is part of the process of creating relationships with the people whose lives we seek to understand and ultimately illuminate for others. But as much as empathy has always been a part of ethnography, and the photo that you see here is purportedly of Zora Neale Hurston actually doing ethnography with musicians coming from this part of the American South in sort of early 1900s. But empathy has never been the goal of ethnography. Rather, ethnography's goal is to create an interpretation of human experience in the context of specific social and cultural phenomena. And ethnography is but one of the tools that helps us do that translation of human values into tangible experiences. Many of us in this room who work with designers probably have been in the experience of thinking of empathy as more of a product. I like to think of it or call it empathy as deliverable. And industry, in fact, asks many of us to become agents of empathy, to circulate it through photos, through photos, through video, storytelling, personas, and ultimately things like empathy mapping workshops. But I want to back up for 1 minute. In Susan Lanzoni's recent work on the history of empathy, we learn that early aesthetic meanings of the term Einfühlung, and forgive me if my German is not very good, so I may not be pronouncing that well, really challenge people to stretch the limits of the self, and thus the understanding of what it is that makes us human. This notion came from the idea of self-transfer, which the science of aesthetics really understood as the value of empathy. It was that projection of one's unconscious feelings, one's inner imagined movements into a work of art itself. And indeed, half a century later, Mark Rothko would observe, the people who weep before my paintings are having the same religious experience that I had when I made them. Now, phenomenological philosophy has also weighed in on the term, taking a slightly different approach to empathy, understanding it as an experience of projection. So for Edmund Husserl and Edith Stein, empathy was an intersubjective mode of relating between humans